All right, Shalom. First and foremost, giving all praise to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai Hashem Akakudash. I'm gonna make this brief video. I just caught this. I guess it's a debate between Captain Tazariak of ISUBK and Andrew Wilson, some YouTube personality guy or whatever, supposed Christian. But they're going into whether Joseph is the father of Yahushai. Of the flesh, like did Joseph actually have sex with Mary, and which we all know and believe that he did. But the point has been brought up several times, and I actually called in on ISUBK. I believe Captain Tazariak, he was in the car at this point in time or something. I called in maybe 2 years ago, actually, and I brought up this issue because, when you come into the truth, there's this saying, sex is marriage, sex is marriage, sex is marriage, and it's kind of been pumped out there and regurgitated over the years. But in all actuality, technically, sex does not always lead to marriage or equal marriage. But marriage is always consummated by the act of sex. What I mean by that is you have harlots, you have prostitutes. You have these women who, okay, men have dealt with them, but they're not considered wives. There's not an actual marriage or a marriage ceremony. There's tons of women. I believe Hagar was cast away. She was a bondmaid. She wasn't an actual wife. There wasn't a ceremony. There wasn't a marriage between Abraham and her. So sex does not always 100% equal marriage. Even in the law, I left a comment and it says the act of sex alone does not always equal marriage, but marriage is indeed always consummated by the act of sex, meaning when the father and the mother, they get together with another family, they have a son and a daughter, and they give their children to each other, right? That marriage is stamped, right, by the act of sex. They come together, they have a ceremony, all the people is there, they essentially have a wedding. And then you have the consummation period where they go into the chamber and they do what adults do. And then after that, you have the token of virginity, which is the sheet that has blood to prove that she was a virgin at that time. And that is the marriage being consummated. If you get with a woman who's not a virgin, that's not your wife. If you get with a woman who hasn't been given to you by her father, that is not your wife. And as you can see right here, Exodus 22 and 16, I said Exodus 22, 16 and 17 is a good example of this. Exodus 22 and 16 and 17 in the NIV, it says, if a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. But there's a caveat. If her father, verse 17, if her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. So when I called in 2 years ago, Captain Tazariak said it was the opposite. He said the father has to pay the man who slept with the woman. He has to pay the man to get his daughter back, which makes no sense. Because regardless if you slept with her or not, she could have agreed with it, right? The scripture says if a man seduces, I believe in the King James Version, it says if a man entices, all right? So you rap to her. Yeah, baby, I got this and I got that. And she went for it. She agreed. And it was consensual sex. If the father doesn't approve of that, that is not your wife. And you must pay to make him whole because you infringed upon his property, which is his daughter. It's not vice versa. The father does not pay the man who slept with his daughter. The man who slept with the daughter, who was refused to be given into marriage to him, right? That's how it goes. The man who slept with the woman has to pay, not vice versa. So let's go to, I brought it up, just for evidential purposes. Exodus 22:16 is an ancient biblical law stating that if a man sleeps with an unmarried woman who is not engaged, he must pay her bride price and marry her. If her father refuses the marriage, the man must still pay the full bride price in money. And as you can see, that there's a YouTube link for David Guzik, who's one of the commentary guys in the Blue Letter Bible, right? But this even also gives you a little insight on why Joseph put away Mary, because it tells you right here in Exodus 22, it could be consensual. At the end of the day, the father has to approve of it. So Joseph and Mary, they were already espoused, right? But they were espoused in a betrothal period, and they were espoused up into a point where there was supposed to be a ceremony, and then they were supposed to go to the chamber. But imagine you have a wedding, right? And you see through the wedding garment, through the dress and all this stuff, that your daughter, who you've given away to this man, is already pregnant. You see what I'm saying? So all of this stuff is tied in with each other, right? There's ways that you can marry. There's ways that you can lay with the woman, right? Exodus 22:16. If you entice her and she agrees and it's consensual, you have to pay. And if the father approves of it, good. He can take the money and approve of it. If the father does not approve of it, it don't matter how many times you hit it from the back. It don't matter how many times you smashed. The father say no, that is not your wife, and you still have to pay. So that's just a little, I'm not really making it a big deal, but this is something that I remember 2 years ago. I called in, and Captain Tazariak, we spoke, not face to face, but we was on the phone, and I believe it's still on his channel. And I asked him about this specifically, and he gave me his opinion on it. He gave me, I guess, ISUPK's doctrinal opinion on it. And I disagreed, but I just left it at that. It's not a big deal, but Exodus 22:16 does say, if you sleep with a woman and it's consensual and the father does not approve, you still have to pay. The father does not pay you. You pay the father.